Good morning, entomologists. It is Wednesday. Have you noticed any interesting bugs while outside lately? Frankie found myriapods while gardening the other day. Did you know that some insects are social creatures? That means they work together to live efficiently in a common place. Let's learn more about social insects in our read aloud today. Love your teachers.
All right, are you ready for some calendar? Good to hear. We know today is Wednesday, and we know the date is Wednesday, May 13th, 2020. Let's say it together. Today is Wednesday, May 13th, 2020. If it's May, the season is spring. Nice job. Today's weather is, what is it? You know what to do. Head to the window, check it out, and I'll meet you back here in 10 seconds. I'm wondering, is it rainy? Is it cloudy? Is it sunny? Is it snowy? Is it thunderstorms? What did you find? Good job. All right, if today's Wednesday, that means yesterday was Tuesday. If yesterday was Tuesday, today is Wednesday. Nice work. And that means tomorrow will be Thursday. What do you notice at the beginning of the word Thursday? I have it underlined here. Our snake comes out of our cage. I don't hear a sound at the beginning of the word Thursday that's in our alphabet. I wonder what that's called. Thursday. Good job with that. I'm going to add the month of the year back to our pile here so that we can sing the months of the year song. What do you think? Here we go. 1, 2, 3. January, February, March, and April, May, June, July, and August, September, October, November, December. There are 12 months in a year. Woo-hoo! How many months are there in a year? You got it. There's 12. Right now, being May, we are in the 5th month of the year. That's why our date has the number 5 in it when we write it on our writing papers. Nice job with calendar today. Make sure that you do a little bit of power word work today, even though I'm not leading it. That's on you, and that's one of your jobs to practice those power words to be the best reader you can be. Stay tuned. We have lots of fun things in store for you today, and I can't wait for you to get started.
Before our read aloud starts, get up and get ready to dance to the Fuzzy Buzzy Honeybee song.
Fuzzy, 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 fuzzy honeybees. Fuzzy, buzzy honeybees.
Honey, honey, honeybees, buzz, buzz to the beat. Waggle, 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 dance.
There's honey over there.
Honey, honey, honeybees, buzz, buzz to the beat.
Fuzzy, buzzy honeybees.
Wow!
Yummy.
Sweet! Let's go!
Honey, honey, honeybees. Buzz, buzz to the beat. Waggle, 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 dance. There's honey over there. Honey, honey, honeybees. Buzz, buzz to the beat. Fuzzy, buzzy honeybees. Fuzzy, buzzy, fuzzy, fuzzy honeybees. Fuzzy, buzzy honeybees. Honeybees.
Nice job dancing. Our learning focus today is on social insects and beehives. So we're actually going to learn a lot about bees today. I'm going to read a story called The Honey Makers. This is a fun one. Your jobs when you're all done, you'll have 3 of them. First, I'm going to have you draw a beehive. I'd like you to add the different types of bees who live there. We'll learn more about those today. You'll also have a digraph worksheet to work on, and your writing today will actually be included in that picture of your beehive. You can just add a sentence or 2 right to the bottom if you'd like to tell me something you've learned about bees today. So those will be your 3 jobs, and we'll get started with the read aloud now. Real quick, before we get started on the read aloud, I just wanted to show you some real life, realistic pictures of a beehive, which is labeled there, along with a queen bee, a drone bee, and a worker bee. The queen bee in my picture has a crown on, which of course it doesn't wear in real life, but it helps you to remember the queen is usually the biggest bee. The drone bee is there in the middle. That's kind of a medium-sized bee. We'll learn a little bit about what their job is in the beehive. And then the worker bees. Worker bees are the smallest of the bees, and they have tons of jobs within the beehive. So we'll learn about those in the read aloud. And keep in mind those 3 types of bees because you'll want to add them to your bee drawing for writing today.
Our story today is called The Honeymakers. It's by Gail Gibbons, one of my favorite authors. She does a wonderful job of writing nonfiction books and tells lots of facts about different plants, animals, and things around the world. So this story is actually a very long story, so I might skip around a little bit. I don't want to keep you for too long, so I'm going to find some of the most important points, and then I'll probably skip over some of the things that I don't think are super necessary. Again, this is called The Honeymakers. What animals make honey? Bees, that's right. The honeymakers. Honeybees travel to and from the hive. Their earliest ancestors lived about 80 million years ago. The scientific name for honeybee comes from the Latin words Apis mellifera, meaning honey bearer. Honeybees are social creatures. They form highly structured groups called colonies. In a colony, as many as 50,000 or more bees live together and work at their own special jobs. So a group of bees is called a colony. Many honeybees like to make their homes in dark, enclosed places. Often, a colony of wild honeybees builds its hive in a hollow tree. Honeybees cared for by today's beekeepers live in box-shaped wooden hives. So people who make honeybees to gather honey usually have hives that look like this. Wild honeybee hives are going to be found in trees, usually in those hollow holes. Inside the beehive, the honeybees are building an amazing structure called honeycomb. It is made up of countless 6-sided cells. Stored in many of these wax cells is the food that bees and people love to eat. Honey! So those little 6-sided cells are called honeycombs. Three different kinds of honeybees live inside all beehives. There is one queen, about 100 male drones, and thousands of female worker bees. Like all insects, bees have 3 body parts. There is the head, the thorax, and the abdomen. Honeybees have other parts too. There's a bunch of their different other parts in those labels. The queen is the largest of the honeybees, and she can live the longest, from 3 to 5 years. All the other bees in the colony live for about 2 months, except over winter, when they live a few months longer. It is the queen's job to make sure the hive never runs out of bees. To do this, she leaves the hive to mate with her drones. Then she lays as many as 2,000 eggs a day. Drones are usually smaller than the queen. Their only job is to mate with her. So those drone bees, the only job is to make babies with queen bee. The little tiny worker bees are all girls, and they don't make any babies. Most cells in the beehive are used for storing honey, but some are used for the queen to lay her eggs. These are called brood cells. In each brood cell, a bee will develop and grow. The largest brood cells are queen brood cells, also called royal cells. Drone brood cells are smaller. Even smaller are the worker brood cells. The eggs in those cells will become worker bees. Although all worker bees are female, they do not lay eggs. Instead, they do the work of the beehive. Most eggs the queen lays are no bigger than the period at the end of this sentence. You see how tiny that little period is? After 3 days, a larva hatches from each one. For the next 3 days, worker bees called nurse bees feed the larva bee milk. Then they feed it bee bread. A queen larva is fed royal jelly throughout its growth. Down here it says royal jelly is made the same way as bee milk, but it's more nutritious.
Bee milk is a milky syrup that is full of nutrition. It is made by glands inside the nurse worker bee. And bee bread is a combination of pollen and honey. That's a worker bee called a nurse bee. Here's some little larvae. Each larva grows quickly, then spins a silky cocoon around itself. Inside the cocoon, a pupa develops. A nurse bee seals the cell with wax. So interesting that these are little bees and they have such important jobs to keep their species alive. Little by little, the pupa changes. It begins to look more like an adult insect. This process is called metamorphosis. Have you heard that word before? Yeah, we have. Queens develop in about 16 days from the time the eggs are laid. The metamorphosis of drones and workers takes about 21 to 24 days. Finally, after the transformation is complete, an adult bee chews its way out of the brood cell, an adult honeybee. Kind of the same way the caterpillar gets out of its chrysalis. This honeybee is a worker bee. From the minute she comes out of her brood cell, she is as busy as a bee. For the next 3 weeks, she will have a number of different jobs to do inside the hive. First, she is a house bee, cleaning and polishing the cells. About 3 days later, she becomes a nurse bee. After 10 days of being a nurse bee, she becomes a wax-making bee. She makes flakes of wax in her abdomen and chews them to mold new cells or repair old ones. Wax-making bees are also in charge of storing the nectar and pollen that other honeybees bring back to the hive. Other workers care for the queen. They are her court. They cluster around the queen to continually feed and groom her. So everybody around the queen bee is kind of taking care of her. So far, we've learned a little bit about the queen bee and about worker bees. About a week later, the wax-making bee becomes a guard bee and begins its outdoor life. Guard bees protect the hive. They chase away intruders with their stingers. They also alert the other bees by spreading a special scent when there is danger. A guard bee will sometimes die in battle to protect the hive and its honey. Wow, they're pretty loyal, those bees. The worker bee is now about 3 weeks old. She is ready to become a forager bee, her last job, but a very important one. Forager bees are the bees you see zipping from flower to flower. They collect sweet juices called nectar from the flowers for honey making. At each flower, the forager bee collects nectar with her proboscis. She stores the nectar in a special part of her body called the crop, or honey stomach. This stomach is separate from her other stomach. As she goes from flower to flower, she comes in contact with a yellow powder called pollen. Some of the pollen is collected in little baskets formed by the special hairs on her hind legs. So bees kind of have these little like baskets on their hind legs that collect all that different pollen. It's a way for them to carry it. As the forager bee collects nectar, she carries pollen from flower to flower. This is part of a process called pollination. Can you say that word? Pollination. You try. Good job. When she has visited many flowers and her crop is full, she beelines back to her hive. Get it? Beelines. It means she gets there quickly. Pollination is the movement of pollen from the stamen to the stigma of the same kind of plant. This makes seeds to grow new plants. So pollination, bees help with pollination by bringing the pollen from one plant to another. They help all of our plants grow. Back inside the hive, the forager bee brings up or regurgitates the nectar. Then she transfers it by tongue to a hive bee. The nectar is passed by tongue among the hive bees until some of its moisture is gone. Then a wax-making bee places the nectar in a honey cell. There, it continues to dry. More and more nectar is added to the honey cell. House bees cluster over the cell and fan their wings to evaporate even more of the moisture in the nectar. As the nectar loses water, it becomes thicker and thicker. Finally, wax-making bees cap or seal the cells with wax. Slowly, the nectar ripens into honey.
So they said over here, nectar that they bring back from the flowers can be up to 80% water when it's first brought back. That means it's mostly water. They don't want a lot of water in it. They want it to be thicker like honey. So by the time it's all in here and capped or sealed, then the honey is about only 18% water. That's how it gets thicker and stickier and gooier, and that's how they like it. Dances of the honeybees. When forager bees return to their hive, they have a special way of telling the other forager bees of important discoveries, like a new location of flowers full of nectar and pollen. They do the dances of the bees. Ooh, the circle dance. This looks like when they go in big circles. The forager honeybee circles in one direction, turns around, and circles back the other way. The dance tells the other forager bees to look for new flowers anywhere within 300 feet of their hive. These animals are so smart. That's one kind of dance. Here's a different kind of dance. Looks like they're going like this, and then like this, and then this. So they're kind of making a figure 8. The wagtail dance. This dance tells the other forager bees that the flowers are farther than 300 feet away. The direction she dances while wagging her tail tells where the flowers are in relation to the sun. The number of wags per 15 seconds tells how far away the flowers are. It's so crazy. A forager honeybee can visit up to 10,000 flowers a day. All the nectar she collects in her entire life can make only about 1 teaspoon of honey. To make a pound of honey, it takes nectar from over 1 million flowers. Also, different kinds of honey come from different kinds of flowers. I'm just so shocked that they do 2 different types of dances to tell their friends where the flowers are that they need to find. That is amazing to me. Honeybees have always been valued for the honey they make. For thousands of years, people have stolen honey from wild beehives. People became beekeepers when they began to make their own hives. Some used hollow logs, others used clay pots. Later, in about 1500, European beekeepers started using upside-down basket hives called skeps. Then, in about 1850, the hanging movable frame beehive was invented. So this is kind of where it all started. People took them from the wild, then they started to put them in logs, then they tried putting them in pots, then they used this thing called a skep, which is like an upside-down basket, and more recently, they're starting to use more box-shaped beehives, kind of like that one we saw when we went to the apple shed. Remember, we could see through it with the glass on both sides? That was really cool. On top of the hill is a modern beehive. The beehive is stacked in sections. In each section hang about 10 wooden frames where the bees build their honeycombs. To help the bees build their honeycombs faster, the beekeeper places wax foundations in the frames. So this says the honey super is the section the beekeepers will harvest. Okay, here's the entrance and the exit for bees. This is the brood chamber. That's where the queen lays her eggs. And then the food chamber is up here. That's where the bees store the honey that they need for their food. So it's kind of broken into 3 different sections. A foundation is a sheet of wax impressed on both sides with a pattern of honeybee cells. So the beekeepers kind of help the bees out by making that foundation sheet for them, so they don't have to do that. They can just fill the cells with wax. It's time for the beekeepers to harvest the honey. The honeybees have had several months to build and fill honeycombs. The colder the winter, the more food they will need. The beekeepers move slowly around the hive. They wear special clothes and use special equipment to protect themselves from getting stung. This one here says white coveralls with elastic or ties at the wrist and ankles. White makes bees feel calm, so that's what they wear. A metal hive tool is used for prying apart frames that are stuck together. They have a helmet with a veil. A veil covers their face. They wear gloves, of course. A smoker calms the bees. Oh, so they're spraying smoke on them. And, of course, they wear boots. Back at home in a shed, the beekeepers use a hot knife to cut the wax caps off the honeycomb. Then the honeycomb frame is placed inside an extractor. It spins around at a high speed to remove the honey without breaking the honeycomb. The honey goes into a collecting tank. Oh, look, so she's kind of scraping the wax off with her knife. And then this looks like an extractor where it's putting the honey into a collecting tank. I thought I was going to skip some pages in this book, but everything's interesting. Next, the honey is filtered through a screen and a cloth to remove small pieces of wax. Then the honey is packed in airtight jars.
Sometimes beekeepers melt down old and damaged honeycombs to make beeswax candles and other things. The rest of the empty honeycomb frames are returned to the hive for the honeybees to fill again. For some beekeepers, honey making is a hobby, like Brockton's dad. Right, Mr. Mitchell? They use the honey themselves or give it away as gifts. Commercial beekeepers provide stores and shops with gleaming jars of their product to sell. Delicious, sweet honey from the honey makers. Oh, this is a beekeeper's yearbook, so it kind of goes through the whole month. It starts with January, February, March, and April, May, June, July, and August, September, October, November, December. They tell the whole year in a book. So they kind of give a rundown of all that happens with the bees in those different months. Pretty cool, huh? And here's a bunch of different facts. If you'd like to read those, you can pause it here and have your parent read that to you. I thought that was a really great book, that Miss Gail Gibbons. She does a wonderful job of explaining different things in kid terms so you can understand. As you can see, bees are very, very important in our world. Not only do they make honey, they also help to pollinate our flowers, which means they help the flowers bloom. If we didn't have bees or other insects to bring pollen from one flower to another, we wouldn't have nearly as many plants blooming, especially this time of year. So we always need to be thankful for bees. I know they can be a little bit scary because they sting, but remember, we learned they only sting when they feel frightened or scared of something, or they feel like maybe they're under attack. So if you leave bees alone, they will usually leave you alone. Okay, you of course don't want to go playing with them, but we do have to be thankful. And whenever I'm around a bee, I try my hardest to not kill it because I know that they're so helpful for our honey and for the pollination of our flowers. I have a couple more activities and things for you to do today, so stay tuned and they will be coming your way in just a minute. We just heard a lot about these different bees and their jobs. That first bee on the left-hand side is a worker bee that starts with a W sound. Their jobs consist of cleaning the hive, feeding babies and the queen. They have to build the honeycombs, they have to guard the hive, and they have to collect pollen and nectar for the hive. Next on the list is the drone bee. In the hive, they do nothing but eat. They do have to fly out to mate with the queen bees. Remember, they're the ones that mate with the queen bees to allow them to lay eggs. Finally, at the bottom, you see the queen. Their only job is to lay eggs in the hive. They get taken care of, they get fed, they get groomed. They are queen of the entire hive.
Hi everyone, Squeaks and I are enjoying a beautiful day outside the fort. Oh look, there's a bee. Oh, it landed on that flower. Let's watch and see what it does. We'll get a little closer, but not bother it. There it goes, buzzing off to find another flower. You know, bees are some of my favorite animals to watch. They always seem so busy. But do you ever wonder what they do all day? You might already know that bees are insects, like ants and beetles. Like all insects, bees have 6 legs and 3 body parts. In bees, these body parts are often brown or yellow, and sometimes they're striped with both colors. Bees also have 4 wings. When their wings move back and forth fast enough to make them fly, they make a buzzing sound that we think of when we hear the word bee. And there's another part of the bee that you've probably heard about, the stinger. But not all bees have stingers, and the ones that do don't sting unless they have a really good reason to, like when they're frightened, or to protect themselves, or to chase other animals away from their nest. There are lots of different kinds of bees, but the 2 kinds that you've probably seen most often are bumblebees and honeybees. Bumblebees are easy to spot because they're big and fluffy. Honeybees are a little smaller and don't look like they're covered in fuzz the way bumblebees do. Both kinds of bees make honey, but bumblebees only make a little, while honeybees produce a lot of that sweet, sticky stuff. And both kinds of bees also live in big groups, inside nests that we call hives. Do you want to see inside a honeybee hive? Let's have a look. This bee is the queen. No, she doesn't wear a crown, but she does have a really important job. She stays in the hive all day and lays eggs. lots of them. After 3 or 4 days, these eggs will hatch and eventually grow into adult honeybees. Most of the other bees that live in the hive are workers. And worker bees? Yep, Squeaks, they do almost all the work. There are lots of jobs for them to do, like helping to build the hive and keeping the hive clean. But their main job, the one that they do almost all of the time, is to look for food. That's what the bee that we saw was doing. She was getting food from that flower. When a worker bee lands on a flower, she drinks a sweet juice from the inside of the flower. This juice is called nectar. While she's on the flower, the bee also brushes up against the yellow dust that the flower makes. This dust is called pollen. So while she's gathering nectar, the bee also gets covered with pollen as she moves around on the flower. When the bee has as much nectar and pollen as she can carry, she flies back to the hive. She feeds some of the nectar and pollen to the baby bees and to the queen, and then she turns most of the nectar into honey. Bees fly back and forth all day collecting nectar and pollen from flowers and taking it back to the hive. When it gets dark, they go back to the hive and rest, and then they're up early the next morning to start again. If you've ever heard the expression, busy as a bee, now you know why we say that. So if you see a bee, you don't have to be afraid of it, but do leave her alone and give her lots of room to get her work done. And that work includes more than making honey. It has something to do with pollen. Next time, we'll see why when you bite into a delicious apple, you should thank a bee. Thanks for joining us on SciShow Kids. Do you have a question about insects or flowers or anything else? If so, get help from a grown-up and let us know. You can leave us a comment below or send us an email to kids@thescishow.com. And we'll see you next time here at the fort.
Last week, we were learning about some different blends, which are when two sounds come together, but you still hear both sounds. They kind of just slide together off your tongue. Today, we're going to learn something new. We're going to learn about H digraphs, otherwise just known as digraphs. Digraphs, remember, are two sounds that come together to make an entirely new sound. I apologize, that title at the bottom there is a little bit tricky to read. But just remember, when two letters come together to make a new sound that we don't usually hear in our alphabet, that's called a digraph. Are you a little curious about why there are pictures of a Charlie, a shark, a whistle, and a thumb? Stay tuned to find out. They all have something in common. We'll talk about 4 digraph sounds today. I'll introduce them. You'll have a chance to practice when I'm all done. First is CH. CH says ch, like Charlie. Next is TH. TH says th, like thumb. SH says sh, like shark. And WH says w, like whistle. Those are 4 digraphs that we will continue practicing, and you'll have a little bit of time to practice later today. Now, I'd like you to echo me. CH, ch, Charlie. You try. Good job. Let's try the next one. Remember, you'll echo me. SH, sh, like shark. Great work. TH, th, like thumb. Nice job. Make sure your snake is coming out of their cage. Your tongue should be sticking out for that one. The last one, WH, w, whistle. You try. Good work. Your activity has been assigned on Seesaw. It's called Matching Digraphs. Since we can't necessarily cut and paste the digraphs at the bottom to the pictures that match, you can just go ahead and use the glow pen or the regular pen on Seesaw to fill in the digraph sound at the beginning of each one of those pictures. So I see the first picture is thumb. I hear the th digraph. I would write TH. There's no need to write the whole word. Just write the digraph that you hear at the beginning. For my writing today, I actually borrowed somebody else's picture of the 3 different types of worker bees doing their jobs in the hive. Then I added the sentence, worker bees have lots of jobs. That sentence had lots of power words, so it was very easy to spell. Any words that I wasn't sure how to spell, I wrote down what I heard, and I was sure to use a capital letter and a period at the end, along with my meatball spaces. I would love to go back and add some color to my picture at some point.
That's all I have for you today. Great job learning about bees and about those digraph sounds. I look forward to seeing what you upload to Seesaw. Meet me on Zoom tonight at 8 o'clock for a bedtime story if you're available.